Hello and welcome to this video tutorial on how we create the metallic effects on Remus Ventanas. This is part of the special issue release videos. If you're watching this, well done, you're part of the Advent Club. Let's make that a thing. Okay, we begin by painting Elven Gold on the surfaces of the miniature. While the paint is still drying, we can add some Peridot Alchemy in the highlighted portions. Now, when we are trying to think of where the reflections sit on the miniature, there's a very easy way to do this. Coat it in a single coverage of a metallic paint, in this case Elven Gold, then take photographs of it. Lots and lots and lots of photographs. You are then able to see where light and dark naturally build up on the miniature and simply fill in the gaps. Peridot Alchemy is a very light, greenish, grey gold. Very unusual gold, great for foregrounding any highlighting we want to achieve. Decayed metal, again from scale 75, is then added as a, it's not a glaze consistency, it's straddling the divide between a glaze and a layer consistency, and that is worked into the shadows. Please pay attention to the style of brush strokes I'm employing. I'm dragging the brush towards the highlights, or conversely, I'm dragging the brush towards the shadows using decayed metal. Wherever I want the most amount of pigment to sit, that's where I want to drag the brush to. The Elven Gold is a really nice mid-tone heroic gold. I like calling it heroic gold because it has quite a lot of yellow in the mixture and is quite bright. It's appropriate for heroic characters. Decayed metal has a lot more brown and dark colours mixed into it, and it makes it appropriate for the shadows. The Peridot Alchemy would be fantastic to use on things like vampires or anything that has a less than stellar reputation. Okay, let's slow things down and let's examine this in its totality with the bird. We add decayed metal to foreground the application of Elven Gold, and before the paint even sets, we are using a clean brush. So you'll notice it go off camera in a second. That's me wiping off any excess paint from the brush, and I will move the brush in between the decayed metal and the gold. This is to give a blended sequence between the two. Peridot Alchemy is then used for the lightning strikes and the filigree, so we have a really nice contrast between the warmer tones of the eagle and the cooler tones of the laurel wreath and the lightning bolts. The aim with the initial layers of the brushwork is not to create a perfectly blended layer. Instead, it is to create strong visual contrast between the shadows and the highlights. Why is this? Well, metallics do struggle with contrast. When we paint a surface with real metallic colour, it reflects the surfaces and light around it. That's why it can be seen as an easier practice rather than non-metallic, where you have to consider each light source in its entirety. The same line of thinking that can be applied to non-metallic should be applied to true metallic. We should aim for high visual, strong contrasts between shadows and highlights. Later glazes will help balance any weird transitions that we make, but the first initial layers need to be thought of kind of like scaffolding. It doesn't look good on the side of the building, but it's the building blocks, it's the building structure that overlays the building we're trying to create. It's the skeleton of the paint job. Without these initial strong contrasts between the shadows and the light, we will end up with a more... insipid's the wrong word, but we end up with a weaker product. We end up with a weaker paint job overall. And one of the weird things when working with metallic paints, when you add strong contrast next to one another, because of the way light reflects from the metallic paint, it's not as noticeable, these very strong transitions, as it is from regular matte paints. Okay, next up, I paint all these silver areas with jet exhaust. Just one flat coat coverage. Nothing fancy, nothing complex. And then we go in by developing the gold a little bit. I use Agrax Earthshade, and I gently wash this into the recesses of the armor plate. No matter how skillful a painter you are, no matter how much you progress, Agrax Earthshade is a joy for all. Agrax Earthshade will improve any paint job. That's not strictly true, but it's catchy if I say it like that. Agrax Earthshade is also applied to the recesses of the eagle to give an old gold appearance. I want this to look like it's aged. Now, once the Agrax Earthshade dries, it does matte down the underlying surface. That's okay, that is part of the effect, that's part of the joy of using this medium, because we can come back with Peridot Alchemy and reapply the highlights to the armor plate. Again, if you're struggling to know where exactly you add shadows and highlights on the metallic surface, take lots of photographs underneath a strong single light source. You are able to see from the photographs where the light and shadows will naturally sit. Next up, to give an old gold appearance to some of the surfaces on Remus Ventanas, we use Lupercal Green. Now, I am aware that Lupercal Green can be a little difficult to find, especially abroad, especially in America. Vallejo Dark Green paint is a really good equivalent to use, and you can find that from the model colour range. There are other equivalent colour charts out there that you can refer to. But this is just glazed down with water, simple water, and added into the gaps and recesses. It's a very light, very thin transitions. It's a very light tint, rather, to give the impression that this gold is oxidized slightly. It's degraded slightly over time. None of the armor plates, even at this time during the Crusade, these armorials might have been in active service for around 200 to 300 years. Finally, Elving Gold is applied as a somewhat like a dry brush consistency onto some of the most prominent details, especially the individual feathers of the Eagle standard. We can overlap this slightly on the highlight because the underlying highlight is light anyway. We'd preserve the luminosity of that Peridot Alchemy while giving the more heroic yellower hint. Finally, Peridot Alchemy is used to add an edge highlight, any scratches, any incidental details that we create. So even though we've used a very limited palette, you can see the kind of contrast we're able to create. It's a very strong dynamic contrast, but the key is working with a very, very strong, strident change in tonality at the outset. It's meant to look good at the end, not the beginning. Not the beginning. Messed that line up. Thank you very much, guys, for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.